Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Better Body Radio, and today we are joined by Kristy Lea Murrell, an online nutrition coach and owner of, little wave there, and owner of Mind Your Fitness, helping women to accept that it's okay to want to change while still loving who you are right now. Kristy is a secondary school teacher of psychology and English by day, but then by night runs her group and one-to-one nutrition coaching business. A psychology graduate, Kristy is also an MNU Certified nutritionist. Again, there's that line that you hear almost every episode. Completing her exams with a distinction at the end of 2019. And I'm also a fellow distinction graduate as well, so there you go. She is also currently training to be a personal trainer. If you take one look at her social media, it's clear to see why women resonate with her so much. She has a great sense of humor, warm personality, and consistently posts warm, relatable content to her target audience. Kristy, welcome to Better Body Radio.
Thank you for the very lovely intro. I am quite humbled by it, to be honest.
There you go. Take it all in. So we'll literally dive.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So let's dive into question number one. So, of course, with every guest we have on the podcast, we do our research, we do our due diligence, some borderline stalking potentially, but it's got to be done. So upon my research ahead of today's episode, I was really impressed with how well you, I suppose, convey your own journey with the many challenges that you kind of came across. And I think many women listening to this podcast will probably be able to relate to your story. Tell our listeners a little bit more about your own, I suppose I would say, and I never like to say just body transformation journey, but just your transformation journey in general.
It's a bit of a long one.
We got time, so crack on.
I'd say I grew up like a lot of people, a bit of a chubby kid, with all the usual things like finish the food on your plate, well done finishing it, no dessert if you don't eat everything. You know, a generation of parents that didn't quite know what they were instilling in you in terms of food relationship and things like that. And that's not really their fault. Like, they were brought up from parents that were during the war and were on rations, and finishing your plate in that sense is actually a really helpful instruction. But when we have an abundance of food, it's not, and times changed, and therefore I grew bigger. Before I knew it, I was in sixth form. Somehow I'd managed to get to the lightest I'd ever been. But I was riddled with bulimia. So I spent my days trying to eat about 800 calories. By night I was starving, so I had a huge meal. Then I ended up going out for runs at silly o'clock at night because I was left feeling guilty over that meal. And over and over and over again, that cycle just continued. And to anybody else, I would have looked like a really healthy 17-year-old. I would have looked like someone that was conscious of the health, that enjoyed going out running. Nobody would have known, like, the utter hatred that I felt inside. Like, my parents didn't know. They thought that I just enjoyed exercise. They weren't equipped for that either. And over the years, continued to struggle, trying every single diet you can think of, like Atkins, Weight Watchers, Slimming World, juice diets, waist trainers. I think there's even some raspberry ketones in my mum's cupboard still somewhere. Just everything you can think of. And that continued for years. I eventually moved to New Zealand, which doesn't sound like it's involved, but it is, because I moved there for somebody else. And then it didn't go well. I left my family, my friends, my career, everything that I had that made me me. So when that all went wrong, I came home and decided to be a little bit more selfish. And that was about the time that people actually started talking about calorie deficit, and I'd never heard of that before. And the scientist in me really felt like that could be the answer, because it made sense, and decided to rebuild my life by starting with my body first, because weirdly that seemed like the easiest thing to fix. Like, I could I could start on my body that night, but I couldn't start getting my career back that night, if that makes sense. And then spent about 6 months doing that. Got involved in quite a famous fitness academy. Went from a small size 16 to a size 8. Won a prize through that academy, and the problem was that I'd done everything that I needed to do to get the body I wanted, but nothing had changed up here. I still felt so minuscule. I don't know if that's the right word, but I just felt like a fake. I felt like to everybody else, I could take the photos, I could post on Instagram, I could do stuff like that. But then when the outward world turned off, I still felt like I had to prove to myself that I was worthy. And I think that's why psychology needs to be such a big part of what we do, because you can adapt your body, but there is such a thing as a body image threshold. Like, you can change your body and it will improve your body image, but everything past that, you need your mind. Your mind's got to come with you, or you'll never be what you want. And then it leads into immense changes that I see people go through as well. They lose a load of weight, and it's not just weight, it's learning to put yourself first and value yourself. And people go one of two ways, where they either go like me and they still don't value themselves, or they end up getting a little bit cocky and they lose themselves that way. And, you know, this is where you see marriages and friendships all breaking up, because nobody quite understands what's going on up here. So that's where MNU kind of came in, because it wasn't enough to know about a calorie deficit. I needed to know the intricacies behind it, because you can't teach yourself self-compassion very convincingly when you don't have all the science about why you're in that place to begin with. So, like, with my clients, I can talk to them about calorie deficit, but unless they get why they haven't been able to do this so far, it's hard for them to believe that it'll change now. So I guess the nutritional science is the basis of what we all need, but the psychology, that prevents us from interpreting all that as you just don't want it enough. And I think my own journey with that, getting the body I wanted and still feeling worthless, is the thing that's made me realize that, and that's influenced my coaching the most, I'd say.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. So I think two things probably to pull out of that is just one, and I'm 100% sure I maybe spoke to Johnny about this. In fact, I might have even brought it up in a couple of podcasts already now, is just this idea of how important identity is, and understanding what your identity is, and whether that's actually something that's changed along with any physical changes you made or not. And I won't go into the book that I usually recommend to people. I've done that in so many of the other podcasts so far, but yeah, it's so true. Like, you see those people go, right, I'm 25 kilos lighter, but they still see, or they still think like they're that 100 and odd kilo person versus that new 80 kilo person. So the body's different, but the behaviors, the thought processes, the identity hasn't changed. And so, like you said, it can't just be a body transformation, for example, which is the big focus in the industry, especially if you're in the body comp side of the industry. It's got to be a complete lifestyle, mindset, body. It's got to be like a complete intrinsic and extrinsic kind of transformation, right? So I think it's quite nice to actually see that message kind of come through time and time again, just how important that is. And I do agree, like, I think we're all a bit fed up, at least any of us who follow any amount of nutrition and training accounts on social media, you get a bit fed up of just being told to eat in a calorie deficit all the time, because, like you said, that's really not the hard bit. It's everything around adhering to that. That's the hard bit, and that's actually where the art of coaching comes in as well. And I think that you, after explaining your story now, kind of in words yourself, it actually makes it quite clear why you named your business what you did, with the emphasis on that mind your fitness, because, like, well, yeah, it starts with the mindset, and if you can get that stuff rolling, then everything else will fall into place alongside it. So
it's the reason why this is actually a psychology symbol in the middle as well of the logo. You don't, without your head, you have nothing.
100%. I mean, listen, I've been doing this for, well, I think next year it's a decade. And like you said, the one thing that they don't teach you in PT school, if you want to call it that, when you're doing your initial PT certifications, is it's all textbook stuff, but just the stuff they really should be teaching you on is like behavioral stuff. How can you work with clients to not dictate to them, but to empower them to make decisions for themselves, to seek the answers. You provide that roadmap, but they've got to find it out for themselves. I think there was one thing I wish I'd have got taught at the start, it would have been that. So this kind of segues nicely onto the second question, because it must be incredibly challenging running that second business, because as I mentioned in the intro, you are a full-time teacher, and at the same time you run the nutrition coaching business on the side, and at the same time you're also very active on social media. So how do you balance that kind of workload, and what made you want to pursue nutrition coaching to help others on top of everything you already do, which in reality teaching is a service-based job as well? So
well, wanting to pursue it was mostly to do with the fact that I thought that there was a gap. Even the challenge that I did in terms of my own transformation didn't involve anything like that, and still doesn't, even though it's been suggested. But in terms of how I juggle this, it's been a huge learning curve. For example, I'm supposed to be in a department meeting right now. My boss yesterday moved a meeting that was tomorrow to right now, and I had to ask permission to do this. Thankfully, they all know about my business and are quite supportive. If I did this again, I'd do it a lot slower, because
right.
I've had to learn that you can do it all, but you can't do it all at the same time. I've had people have paid me compliments like, I don't know anyone that works as hard as you, or you Wonder Woman, you do it all. But the irony of it is that I'm a psychology grad, and I had to learn some lessons in mindset and make some compromises in my own life to save my mental health because of doing both things. So at one point I was doing both jobs, MNU, mental health course, and then trying to diet. And then, as much as you understand, or as I already know, that you need to have enough headspace to achieve your goals, I really think it's something that you have to live through to fully understand and be able to identify with others and have that empathy. So in a way, it's been a good thing, because it's led to more self-compassion for myself, and that leads to me being a better coach, because sometimes you do need to be the person that says, can you really do all this right now? Is it really a good time to diet? So I think that hardship has been a good thing in that way. But if I did it again, I wouldn't try and do so much in one. And particularly in lockdown, as we spoke about earlier, I feel dramatically better because my teaching load has reduced. I'm still teaching now, I'm still online teaching, but it's not quite as intense as being at school. And I didn't quite realise how stressed I was until things slowed down. And it's making me realise that I cannot continue to do this like this. So in the next year, I'm hoping that I'll at least be part-time, because I can't do all of it, is the honest answer.
Yeah, and I think I was speaking to, I think it was Charlotte Fisher when I had her on, and just this idea of juggling workloads and balance. And yeah, like you said, at some stage, something's got to give, right? And that, I mean, I think that's maybe something that we maybe dive into, or I was potentially wondering how you would kind of go about addressing this question, and whether, I mean, you already said you're doing this instead of being at a staff meeting. I'm just like, edit out. But if,
they know about it, it's fine.
Exactly. But for example, have you thought or ever had those conversations with your bosses about, well, if the nutrition stuff really kicked off, that you may potentially even go down and pursue that path? Is that something that you've thought about, or?
Yeah, I have actually already spoke to them about it. When I started this, I literally started it because I felt like people needed it. it was never something that I thought would be a full-time job or anything like that. I thought it would just be something to help people on the side because I feel really passionate about it. But it's becoming a lot bigger. And before lockdown happened, I was so stressed that I did end up talking to them about going part-time. And like I say, they've been really supportive. They know that people have lives outside of their main role, and they know that people have other passions. My school is really, really supportive. I've been very lucky.
Yeah, definitely. Like I say, I don't think all employers would be necessarily so supportive. So that's awesome that they've been so understanding. So let's move on to a little bit of your, coming back to your backstory and about the honors with psychology, and how. So tell me, how has your formal education influenced the way you practice with your current clients, would you say?
I think it's been essential. So I think because of our culture, dieting is something incredibly emotional. Like, it's not just gaining or losing body fat anymore. It's somehow associated with worth, and even falls into people's beliefs and their abilities to do other things in their lives. Like, they think if they can't diet, they can't do other things too. And I think a base in psychology is essential for any coach that truly wants to do right by the clients. And that could be as simple as learning about motivation and habit formation. That'll help tons, even if that's just a starting point. But I'd actually like to see more coaches learning about psychological flexibility, or in other words, resilience. So it's knowing that it's not about pulling your socks up and getting on with things with determination and discipline, and then it's more about accepting feelings you have and acknowledging them and being adaptable. So I think that is what it's given me an edge with, because I've never been of the standpoint that when someone's accountable to me, they're going to get told off. And unfortunately, I know that people in our circle aren't particularly like that, but there are hundreds of people helping people lose weight out there that do treat people like that.
Yep.
And that's why I think it's so essential. And as you said before, with I'm training to be a PT at the minute, and there's zero psychology in it. And without that formal education, I would have never considered those things. If I'd have just trained to be a PT, I could have fallen into that trap too, simply because I just didn't know any better.
Yeah, it's this kind of idea of treating people like the robots, and we just know that that's not the case. And the reality is even most comp prep, like I was speaking to Cal about this as well, though, and I think a lot of people think, oh, well, everyone you train are just a bunch of robots, and he's like, well, they're definitely a bit more adherent than the majority of the general population, but they're still people.
Yeah.
And he really has to dive in sometimes to a lot of different stuff as well. And a lot of people would say, look at someone like Callum and think, he's a bit of a meathead, but is incredibly emotionally intelligent, the part you don't see on social media. And I think any good coach that I've met, Dan Smith at M10 is a good friend as well, who we're going to have on the podcast as well, and he's incredibly good with psychology. And I think any coach I know who's done really well, at least been in the industry a long time, even if they didn't have any formal background in it. Like my wife, her degree was in psychology and pharmacology. So essentially the idea of going on and looking at, okay, how can we combine, like say, medication with plans to try and deal with some of these issues. She didn't end up pursuing that path because there wasn't really any major jobs in that area, and she studied fitness at the same time. But the long story short is that gave her a really good base, because when she first started coaching a lot of females, she was able to really put a huge emphasis on that side of things because she understood how important it was. But like you say, it's not until you take, okay, that's the textbook stuff from uni. Now I'm in a field where I'm trying to combine training, nutrition, and the effect that's having on someone on a physical and psychological level, and then having to manage all of those things in tandem. That's where the real experience comes in, I think. And so, it's super interesting that you hear that. And I do agree. I think if I look at the way because I'm going to be getting involved in an advanced personal training certification as part of the education staff out here later this year. And one thing I'd probably bring up as far as putting the curriculum together would be there needs to be psychology, behavioral stuff in there, because if there's not, we're doing a huge disservice to people trying to bridge the gap between being a newly qualified PT and actually really doing seriously good work with people. So
That's
it's really cool to
incredible.
hear that. So it's really cool to hear that, though, that and I think that, yeah, it just completely aligns with what we're constantly, preaching to our coaches and our team, is that we've got to put more effort into, and even now we still feel like we want to continually put more and more and more work into that side of things, because I think there's only so far you can go with the technical knowledge. I mean, granted, I'm very lucky to work with other coaches and coach other coaches and train them and everything else, but even them are not, they're not exactly devoid of any psychological stuff that they need help with and things like that as well. And so I think it is literally the biggest gap in the industry, because it's easy to learn the technical stuff. Well, we've got almost all the information we need to become good at biomechanics, to apply different nutrition protocols. But I think that bit in the middle, like you said, is the key. So if I were to bring it back to your clients, speaking of struggles and speaking of everything they go through, what would you say the main struggles your clients are going through when they kind of reach out for coaching?
I'd say that most people, not all, but most, come to me and they already understand the basics of nutrition. So they'll already know energy balance. They may have heard of calorie deficit before. They understand what they need to do. They don't understand why they can't do it. So the ladies that come to me have usually spent most of the time angry at themselves, beating themselves up. They feel like they keep failing. And they're spending most of the time thinking about the fact that they're a failure instead of reflecting and learning from each experience. And one of the most wonderful things I see is when they go from answering my week 1 question of why did you come to Mind Your Fitness with something like, because I need to get a grip and I'm disgusted I've let my weight get this far. And then as we go on and they start to have fluctuations, as we all do, you see things like, I've gained this week because I ate over my calories, but that's all right. I decided to anyway because I went out for my favourite meal at my favourite restaurant. I'm not worried about the gain, plan for it. And I know one meal doesn't make a big difference overall. And just like seeing that stretch from someone that is literally having a go at themselves for the weight that they are, to being to justifying to themselves that actually it's all right to gain weight and it's been worth it this week to gain weight. It's never been about the weight loss. It's whether they gain, maintain or lose weight is never ever been the issue. How they think about it is. So that's why most people come to me, to stop beating themselves up and start actually feeling a little bit more neutral around both food and weight. And that neutrality leads to them being able to make those gains in weight loss when they want to, and chill out a bit when they've got sort of barriers in the way that mean that we have a week at maintenance or something like that. So yeah, they're the main struggles, I would say, that they understand what they have to do, they don't understand why they can't do it.
Yeah, that's very cool. And I think, like you said, given that, or just helping people to discover that for themselves, because there's no amount of theory or teaching or telling someone, well, this is the reason why. Like you say, they almost have to, it's a self-discovery. And really it's just providing a roadmap for that self-discovery as to, right, oh, actually, hold on a minute. It doesn't have to be the 12 to 16 week transformation like everyone keeps telling me I need to do. It's okay to have a week off here. It's okay to say, right, well, I understand that if I have this, that I can't expect things to move in the right direction. But you know what? I'm cool to take the hit on that, like you said. And I think that's such a suffocating mindset that people get trapped in, is this idea that they have to be all or nothing. And I spoke about this on...
my favourite part. Like, I've had some people that have said, I'm actually going to actively try and gain weight this week because I want to prove to myself that it's okay. And that is, to this day, that has been my favourite check-in that I have ever had, that someone has actively decided to gain weight and they're okay about it.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. So what's next for Mind Your Fitness?
Gosh, it snowballed into something so much bigger. Like, without giving too much away, I've started trying to piece together a book, one that might genuinely make a difference. So not so much a self-help book or like, here's what a calorie deficit is book, but something that's a bit more actionable and like a bit more holistic, I guess. which sounds like a really wishy-washy word, but that's the only way I can really describe it. At the end of the day, like I said before, I never really dreamt I'd be doing this. That's my front door going.
Nice.
And everything that comes with it just feels like a bonus. Like, I would do this for free anyway. I get so much enjoyment from it, which I think is partly linked to being a teacher, but it doesn't really matter to me what it earns me. It's the stuff that happens with it. Like, last year I had a lady lose 30 pounds and it meant she qualified for IVF treatment. Like, no money can buy that. And I think that's what it's about. And I'd like to come maybe full circle and start doing talks in schools. You hear so much day to day, and the kids get me off on a tangent every time. Like, if they don't want to do something in lesson, they'll ask me something about nutrition, and I'm such a sucker for it. But it is important, because, like, just yesterday I saw that an ex-Love Islander that is now decided to become a body transformation coach, and some of the posts are like, if you want abs, don't feed them pizza, or don't eat anything you see on a TV advert. And like, Yorkshire tea comes on every ad break of Emmerdale. Like, are you telling me I can't have my, like, cuppa with my custard creams? It's not on. Like, all of the stuff that makes for an amazing relationship with food needs to be, people like you and I need to be heard a little bit more, and in schools to catch things early. Because I think if someone like me or you had come and spoken to me when I was in school and taught me about this, I would never have ended up with bulimia. And I think that's where I would like to go with it eventually, to prevent that.
Yeah, it's very cool. It's kind of almost going back to, like, the right beginning of the backstory. Okay, how can I prevent as many people going through what I went through as possible? And that's always quite a powerful mission to have, I would say, because it sits quite deep, because you've had to go through that. You've felt every emotion and feeling and all the struggles that goes with it, but also, of course, all the positive outcomes and benefits that comes with overcoming all of that as well. It's a bit of a side tangent before I get into the quick fire round, but with the school side of things, I find that area very interesting, because I know certainly I've been into schools in the past to do, like, little exercise sessions and things like that, and the whole construct's very interesting, because you can see that, everything that goes into getting all the kids to behave and be attentive and to actually participate and take part. And that's for something that's fairly physical. It's like, once they get going, everyone's like, and they're loving it, going crazy. And there's always that one kid that's a problem kid, but they're usually okay by the end. With the nutrition stuff, I mean, how diluted or how kind of misinformed and dangerous is the information that they're getting exposed to, would you say? Like, how far is it away from where it should be, and what do you think it would take for that to change significantly?
Honestly, I haven't seen the catering lessons, so I don't know what's taught in them, but most of the detrimental stuff comes from the wider culture of things that are spread. So it's little comments like a teacher saying, oh yeah, all those cakes at the weekend, or something like that the kids overhear, and it does go in. And also, we have something called PSHE, which is physical social health education, and within that we've had a week where we've talked about eating disorders, because we have to cover all bases of health, really, to try and help the kids grow up. And it is really good that we're starting to talk about eating disorders, but the guidance on it isn't very good, in my opinion, because they're asking form tutors to present it, which is generally the way, like, most form tutors would do PSHE. And then the information that they're given is correct, but sometimes the interpretation is not. So, for example, I had to give a lesson to my form about eating disorders, and we talked about anorexia and the signs of it, and what to look for, and if you feel what you might be feeling, and who you can go talk to, and all that stuff. And obviously for me, I loved being able to teach them about that. But then I went up to the staff room, and then I spoke to some of the other form tutors that had delivered the same talk with the same PowerPoint as me. And one of them was saying, oh yeah, we talked about the signs of anorexia, and what talked about the signs of them. And one of the kids said, oh yeah, your stomach might grumble all the time. And I was like, whoa, that's not right. Like, when you've got anorexia, your stomach's not rumbling all the time. That's not a sign. And that, I think that's where the problem is, that even though all these things are well intentioned, because they're not giving people the proper training to deliver it, even when everything on that PowerPoint is absolutely correct, the interpretation can be dangerous. And that's what scares me the most.
The interpretation and delivery. So I guess it's, how do you get more people passionate about delivering this type of message in the right way to kids? We need more of those people, by the sounds of it.
I think most of it is just that the misinformation is so widespread that even when people are genuinely trying to help, they don't have enough knowledge to do so.
Yeah, and just imagine, you see the amount of misinformation amongst the adult population, never mind that same population trying to deliver an even more Chinese whisper style misinformation to the kids and everything else. It's a big ask. It's a big challenge to kind of overcome. I think requires a bit more than just a PowerPoint presentation and an hour every once in a while in a semester.
Well, it's funny you say, because the adult stuff is where a lot of my posts come from. It's from being sat in the staff room. Often you don't want to be that person that is a nutritionist, so every time someone talks about food you butt in. You don't want to be that person, because everybody will hate you. But occasionally I listen, and every so often one of them will go, oh well, let's ask Kristy. And then usually what I say is completely the opposite to what one of them has been spouting is the absolute truth. And that's a very awkward situation to be in. So you have to wait to be asked, really. But yeah, like you say, the amount of misinformation, and some of it is so believable that it's easy to get conned. It's the reason why I got conned for 10 years. Like,
yeah, it's kind of like this, and it just shows you, even like documentaries like, on Netflix, like What the Health and all these other, Game Changers was obviously the recent one. It's so easy if you have a compelling narrative, or you deliver it in a certain way, or you use intellectual shortcuts where you just take partial truths of something and deliver it in such a way where it's like, oh, well, that seems fairly plausible or logical. But like you said, without the context or the actual deeper information, it's amazing how easily it is to get these points across. That's super interesting.
That was a big conversation in the staff room, believe me, the Game Changers one.
Oh God, I bet it was. But I tell you what, though, you must be sitting thinking, this is a bloody gold mine. I've got posts for months out of this. Hey, every cloud and all that, right? Every cloud has a silver lining.
Yeah, every cloud.
So we are going to fire into the quick fire round. So this is literally fun, random questions. Kristy has no idea what's about to be thrown at her.
This is the bit I'm most nervous about.
It's funny. Everyone's always like, oh, I'm scared. Even Johnny was like, I'm petrified. He's like, you've got nothing to worry about. Just quick, honest
I'm
answers.
scared that I'm going to say something that ends up with me like in trouble with somebody else.
There's nothing like that. We've kept it fairly PG. So don't worry. We're all good. All right, ready?
Yeah.
Favorite biscuit?
Oh, custard creams.
I thought that earlier. I thought, God, she said custard creams earlier, so I already know the answer to that, but I'm going to ask it anyway. If you were to choose
My Instagram bio used to say custard cream fiend on it. I think my Twitter one still does.
Insightful. Biscuits or cakes?
Biscuits.
Oh,
I had to really think about that.
Yeah, you did. Donuts or brownies?
Depends what donut.
Quick fire. Going to put you under the gun here.
Donuts.
Okay, there we go.
Like either jam donut or the like Biscoff Lotus ones from Krispy Kreme.
There you go. I like that. Specifics are good. Favorite meal out?
Italian.
There you go. Anything particular?
All of the things that I'm not supposed to have. So I have a lactose intolerance, but I want all the stuff with cheese on. So like if we go out for an Italian, I pop about 5 antihistamines and then dive in. It's like an allergy rather than an intolerance. It's on the verge.
So pizza is I'm going to have to take the hit on this meal when you go for a pizza.
Yeah.
Oh, pizza's so good as well. That's exactly like we talked about as well. It's weighing up risk versus reward, right? And sometimes it's just worth it. Favorite exercise in the gym?
Hip thrust. Definitely.
The thrust is a must. It's got to be done. What's your most detested
exercise? It's a shame about all the... Sorry?
Most detested exercise?
Oh, lunges. My balance is awful. Like, and it's awful to the extent that at some point I'm like, do you know what? I'm just going to be a person that doesn't lunge. I
don't know about that. So it's a controversial one. I think you got to ride the wave and get better at those. But I tell you what, lunges and split squats. I live with
someone that has the same opinion as you.
Lunges and split squats are. I think that when you say most hated, I would almost say that 50% of the time that's going to come up. Just about every time.
I can do a split squat. I can't walk. I can't lunge and walk.
Can't stabilize while you lunge. There you go.
No.
If you could only travel to one place post-COVID, where would it be?
Oh. It would be somewhere with wonderful waterfalls. I haven't been to South Africa yet. Maybe there. I used to live in New Zealand though, and that's just like the epitome of beauty. So I'd be tempted to say that, but it has some negative memories for me. So maybe South Africa.
Yeah, New Zealand's on the bucket list for me for sure. What's an interesting fact most people may not know about you?
Well, now you already know. I was going to say that I've worked in. I used to teach horse riding in Utah in America.
Very nice. Where? Last question before I ask about where people can find you. Who should we have next on the podcast?
Oh, do you know what would be amazing? If you could get Kimberly Wilson. I adore her. She's food and psych on Instagram. She's a psychologist that works with nutrition. So her role combines both. Her podcast as well is excellent. So it like goes into all the intricacies of how, for example, if you will have heard of the Smiles trial about food quality and its impact on mental health, and she picks apart stuff like that, but in a way you can actually understand it. She'd be amazing.
Well, I'll need to get her handle off of you, and I will definitely reach out. Yeah. Do you know her? Do you know her personally? Have you ever had any communication with her?
No, she's way above me. But she was on Fitness Unfiltered though, so may not be so unreachable.
No, you know what? I'll throw it out there and see what we can do.
Yeah.
And if I do manage to get her on, I'm going to let you know straight away.
Yeah, tell her I sent you. Get me a friend.
What, you don't know Kristy from Mind Your Fitness? Big time. Where's the best place for people to find you?
Predominantly active on Instagram at Kristy_Mind Your Fitness. Also on Facebook, also on Twitter, but Twitter won't let me have a handle that long. So it's Kristy_MYF, and YouTube is the same, but most of my stuff is on Instagram. And if you want to look at the website, it's www.mindyourfitness.net.
Awesome. So I will link that all in the show notes anyway. And guys, the best way you can support the podcast is to get on iTunes, leave us a 5-star review. The more people we can get this stuff in front of, the more people we can help in a positive way. Kristy, thanks again for coming on.
No, thank you for having me. And I am really, really flattered. Thank you.
Of course.